Cover, Alderman, District 4.
Dennis Pollock, 6th Ward Alderman.
Dean Veneman, Alderman, District 2.
Thank you. Item 1, request from CW Prime Development for a special exception to exceed the floor area of an attached garage maximum in the mixed residential R2 district at 4510 Ridgeview Lane, parcel ID 3414543. Kyle?
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Liz to give a summary of the request.
Thanks. So the applicant seeks to construct a single-family dwelling with an attached garage that exceeds the 50% ground floor living area by 108 feet. The Planning Commission may allow a special exception to exceed the 50% requirement, given it's deducted from the allowable floor area of detached accessory buildings. Can you go to the next slide? We've recommended approval for this type of request in the past, and one was approved in the same neighborhood. Can you go to the next? Therefore, we are recommending approval with the following condition. A total of 108 square feet shall be deducted from the allowable floor area of any future detached buildings.
So, thank you. Questions, comments? Commission, what are your wishes?
I'll note that the applicant is here as well, if you have questions for the applicant.
I motion to approve with the staff recommendations.
Second.
I got a motion by Marutz, second by Palmquist. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, go ahead and put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. 5-0. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a turn here. We're going to recess this Planning Commission and wait until 4:30 when we start the Common Council meeting, where we will be listening to the presentation of the Downtown Master Plan by the Community Development Department and the consultant Bolton and Menk. So we have a few minutes here, and then at the end of the presentation, we will adjourn both of the meetings. Thank you. 18th, 2025 at 4:30. Keeping in mind, this meeting is running at the same time as the continued Planning Commission meeting. So we are now going to open the floor to the Downtown Master Plan. Kyle.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and attending this special meeting today. My thoughts were that because we had a normal council meeting tonight, if we brought you in together here before the council meeting, we'd have good attendance, and it would give you an opportunity to provide some last-minute feedback and input on the plan. With that being said, we do have the Downtown Master Plan consultant, Bolton and Menk, here. I'll have them approach the podium, introduce themselves, and then they'll roll right into the presentation. Come on up, guys. Approach the podium. I do want to note, too, we do have a few members on Zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and mirror my screen on Zoom with the presentation. Give me a minute or two for those on Zoom. And just to be clear, we've got Alder Austin on Zoom, so we do have another Alder. Thank you.
Okay.
think it's on now. Yeah, you can hear me okay? All right, 1 second here. Hate these things. Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Kyle. And thank you very much, Mayor, members of council, Planning Commission, and staff that are here. Appreciate your time tonight. My name is Andrew Dresner. I am here together with my colleague, Mike Thompson, with whom I will share the presentation on the Downtown Master Plan. Mike and I are from Bolton and Menk. Bolton Menk is an engineering and planning firm. We were hired by the city about a year ago or so to help you write this and author this Downtown Master Plan. We've been working closely, and I want to extend a special thanks to Kyle and Liz, who you both know, who have been our primary contacts on this project. They've shepherded the project through. They've made the contacts in the community, helped out with data, helped steer the process, and they've been terrific. So we greatly appreciate their work. There are others who I'm going to thank also later in this presentation and explain their role. In any event, so our work here, we consider this a real an honor and a privilege to do this type of work. I've been an urban planner for longer than I need to state. When it started with a full head of hair, but that's the type of, but we take this work very seriously, and it's an honor and a privilege, and we don't take the responsibility lightly. So hopefully our passion for this work shows through, and we're able to deliver you a plan that works for you, and a plan that you can see through over the next 10, 15 to 20 years. So this work is for your downtown. Downtowns are special in every community. It's where the two cities came together here to create Wisconsin Rapids. Downtowns are always a place where the identity of the community is formed. They're always a place where the economy needs to thrive. They're a place where the community comes together. That's always been the case for downtown Rapids, but the nature of downtown Rapids has changed over the years because the economy has changed over the years. This plan endeavors to set a course for a new downtown for you and for your community. The plan contains a lot. It's a big meal. So we're going to go through it in 25 minutes or so and touch on the high points. You have in front of you all the slides, so you can look a little more closely. And I believe last week you received a full draft of the plan, which was the full meal. That was the 60 or so pages. And there's a lot in it, so we'll touch the high points. So the project includes policy initiatives that help guide the changes in downtown. It includes a series of projects that the city could undertake in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And
I just
we good?
want to let you know that one of the TVs is not on, so
oh, okay,
we're going to try to fix that here.
okay. Shall I pause for a moment?
Yes, please.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, we are good now. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. So this project includes policy initiatives that help guide downtown. It includes projects, construction projects, capital projects that help change downtown into the future vision. And it's a plan that really it's Kyle and Liz's work plan for the next 5, 10, 15 years in downtown. It helps them organize the work of the city within the downtown. And then finally, it's a plan not just for you, but it's a plan for the private sector. The intent of this plan is that it attracts investment across the spectrum, a wide variety of private investment. And the plan coordinates that investment with public investment to make a better whole. The process of this plan is important. As I mentioned, we were hired about a year ago to start this work. And we don't just do this work in our office back home. It starts really with listening to your community. So you may have been on the online platform, which was called Mind Mixer. It's the platform where we took in a lot of input. You may have been on it. If you weren't on it, a lot of your constituents and a lot of residents around the community were on it. We had about 90 or 100 people giving input through this platform on 10 topics and 500 or so ideas coming in. And that started last summer and has continued throughout. We also, and I shouldn't take credit for it, I should give credit to Liz and Kyle, conducted a series of meetings downtown during Lunch on the River last summer and last fall in order to get other input on the future of downtown. We also conducted an open house last fall at 4 different locations, at the library, the coffee shop, a couple restaurants downtown, to get yet more input. So point being that, I should also mention, we also work closely with a steering committee. Several members are in the crowd today. Stacy and Jason are here. The point being that this plan, yes, it does come from us, but it also comes from your community, and hopefully, and we do believe it reflects the aspirations of your community. This next slide has a lot of words on it, but these are some of the literal quotations, the quotes that we received online from your community. Ideas about different businesses downtown, ideas about how downtown can be used differently in the future as it relates to recreation, as it relates to events, as it relates to getting to downtown. So this was very helpful, and this was some of the data that went into the plan. The structure of the plan is relatively simple, and Mike and I will split it up. I'm going to talk about some of the major findings and about 3 basic systems of your city, of downtown. Those systems are transportation, open space, and development. And then Mike will carry it forward and talk about how those 3 systems come to bear in 5 different areas of your downtown. So some of our key findings and recommendations are on this slide here, and we've pulled out just 8 of them. Through our interviews and through our research, we've learned that there are some regulatory and institutional barriers to redevelopment, as well as a lack of a coordinated vision for what downtown should be in this next generation. So this plan addresses several of those. We also learned that downtown streets are overbuilt for cars and underbuilt for bikes and pedestrians. So there are several recommendations in the plan that address that. The third key finding isn't rocket scientist. It speaks to the river being a great asset. Everyone loves the river. It's the center of downtown. It's the center of the city. It's a significant pride point of the city. So how can this plan leverage it yet more? Another key finding is that downtown should be solutions-oriented, forward-looking, and entrepreneurial, that a future downtown needs to be a place where we can find ways to, find ways to approve things, find ways to incentivize good things downtown. We also learned that events and programming are very, very, very popular downtown. People from all over the community and all over the region come downtown for the events and programming, and there's no reason not to expand those. The residential population downtown is almost non-existent, yet it's essential to transform the downtown into its next generation. We also learned there's ample space for growth, both in existing buildings as well as in vacant lots. And finally, that vacant land can be used to attract those needs or attract those uses that will help downtown into the future, specifically residential and commercial developments. So the plan has 4 big ideas. I'll talk about those in a moment. It talks about it has 3 frameworks that I mentioned before, and then 5 catalytic projects. The 4 big ideas that guide this overall plan are first that that downtown should become a robust and a complete neighborhood. And we use the word neighborhood intentionally because the word neighborhood indicates a place of living. And right now downtown, people don't live downtown. They live right on the edges of downtown. And in fact, there are a lot of great things about downtown that would make for a wonderful neighborhood. And we believe it can be a place for new housing to attract new people to the community, as well as serve people who are in the community now who are going through different phases of life, who don't have in the community right now a full complement of housing choices. The second big idea is to think about streets not just as places for cars, but streets as places, okay? We tend to think of them as just places for cars, but we think it's important to broaden our definition of streets and think of them as places for people to enjoy, places for events to happen, places as front doors for new investment. And when we think of it that way, we can think about repositioning them as an asset to downtown, not just as something for transportation. The third big idea is to celebrate and leverage the river. A lot of investment has already gone into the riverfront, I should say, with new parks and new trails. They are clearly an aspect of the downtown that is loved and something that can be leveraged for yet greater good. And then the fourth and final big idea is to think of downtown as a place for entrepreneurial activity, a place to try out ideas, a place to attract new businesses, a place of creativity. And that relates to issues around affordability, regulations, access, inclusion, et cetera. So these are the four kind of umbrella big ideas that guide this plan. Okay. Oops, sorry. So now I'm going to go through a series of recommendations that relate to those three frameworks: transportation, parks and open space, and development. I'll try to hit on just the higher points of them. So the first is transportation or connectivity. We call it the welcome and stay, because it's really what we're trying to accomplish. We're not trying to accomplish downtown as a place to pass through, but it's a place that is welcoming and a place to stay. So a couple of the important recommendations in the plan related to this topic. First of all, there are a couple of existing gaps in your bike and pedestrian system that we think can be filled. The major one is the trail that is right outside our way here, the bike trail along Jackson that ends at the river. This plan proposes extending it across the bridge and then all the way up Jackson on the east side of the river via a greenway. Okay, so this will be a safe, comfortable, we call it protected way for families to get downtown. Okay, there are lanes, bike lanes on Grand Avenue, but those are for experienced riders. So we think that's an important gap in the network, bicycle gap and pedestrian gap in the network to fill. A second idea related to this topic is the idea of creating A streets and B streets. So I mentioned earlier that your streets are overbuilt for cars and underbuilt for pedestrians. So what this plan does, one of the things this plan does is it defines First Street and First Avenue, those streets that are right up along the river, as we call them A streets or amenity streets. So those are streets in which we're proposing to, excuse me, transition them into streets that have maybe a little bit less parking and a lot more amenity. So some of those amenities we might be talking about are things like benches, things like dining patios, things that want to be on the river because that's where those two roads are. They would not, we are not suggesting eliminating parking from them. We're simply suggesting thinking about those streets as places that can be places for events, places for enjoying, places for strolling. And Mike will show a couple of those ideas moving on. And then the third idea is about organizing parking. This isn't about eliminating parking. It's about creating actually more and different types of parking scattered throughout the downtown. So right now, a good bit of your parking is packed right up along the river. The image on the right on the slide or in your hand there looks at three streets, and in pink is the part of those streets that's dedicated to driving and to parking. These happen to be the A streets or the amenity streets. So the plan proposes transitioning them and redesigning them so they can accommodate more events. They can be more comfortable for dining patios, more comfortable as places right next to the park. So organizing parking is really important. And it doesn't just happen here along the river. We have other proposals in here for shared parking lots with partners at the county, as well as with private development on other blocks. A second framework is development, and this is really mostly about this is almost exclusively about private development, about attracting private development. So a couple points I want to make here. This is about focusing development along the river that wants to be along the river. So that would be, we can call it experience retail, we can call it restaurants that look out over the river, some amount of housing that would benefit from being along the river. So we think it makes sense to have a special zone along the river for uses that really just want to be on the river and want to leverage their position along the river. We also think it's important to find places along the edges of downtown, at the seams between downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods, to start to insert housing within the downtown. So you see this in yellow on the slide or in front of you. These are all sites that are kind of in that seam area. Most of them, or many of them, are publicly owned. So the plan proposes partnerships with private development to bring in new housing downtown. New housing that would probably be apartment style or townhouse style. New housing that would not just, as I mentioned earlier, not just attract new residents to downtown, but also serve your existing residents who are going through phases of life for whom the current housing stock is not adequate. And then finally, we think it's important in this category to preserve and revitalize the historic assets downtown. Downtown's lost a lot of buildings. You have several buildings here that have plenty good bones that can be continued to be used, can be revitalized, and can be redeveloped. I'll point out two in particular, and those are the pink dots on the screen or in the map in front of you. One is the Tribune building along the river, and the other, of course, is the U.S. Bank building. So this plan recommends preserving them and incorporating them into new development. The final point I want to speak on before I hand it off to Mike would be the topic of parks and recreation. We know from our work that downtowns aren't just about commerce. Many of them are about the integration of open space and recreation with commerce and with events downtown. And this category speaks to that. So you already have several great parks downtown along the river. We're recommending a concept such as park acupuncture, which is not about necessarily expanding those parks, but it's about gently inserting new amenities into those parks that attract new users. So an example might be a coffee cart, okay? Not a big construction project, just a simple coffee cart. Or maybe a place where an outfitter can launch canoes. Or maybe a place where a more permanent use of food carts. So simple ideas to bring more activation into your existing parks. This section also talks about new and improved connections to the river. And I spoke a little bit about them earlier, in particular the Jackson Street Greenway that would enable anyone who lives, or many people on the east side of the river, to get down to the river by bike in a safe way. I also, the second bullet here is about extending the riverfront to First and Second Streets east and west through that idea of A streets. Those are the A streets I mentioned earlier. So really thinking about those as parkfront streets to accommodate things like dining patios and more events. And then the final bullet here is about the long-term potential opportunity of the river block, which is, I'm disoriented, it's on the river. I think you all noticed, a county building. Its lease will come up eventually, and a big decision needs to be made whether to re-up that lease and reoccupy that, or possibly open that space up for a larger park space, something that would accommodate larger events events downtown. Okay? So I've walked through a series of big ideas. Actually, I started with a process. I talked about some of the major conclusions, some of the big ideas. I talked about parks and open space, transportation and development. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mike now to talk about 5 areas of downtown that we define here as catalytic projects.
Thank you, Andrew. And again, it's great to be with you. We've been looking forward to tonight for quite some time. I'll, of course, echo a privilege it's been to work with your community, your staff, Kyle, Elizabeth in particular, in the steering committee. So we're really excited to be here and now kind of take that next level down in granularity and detail to the catalytic projects. So you can see the 5 of them on the screen in front of you. I'll spend a few minutes talking about each, kind of the high-level takeaways or ideas behind them. We'll touch on implementation briefly, and then looking forward to some conversation and questions. So starting west to east, really the west gateway, kind of right there at the along the highway, the parking lot space, et cetera, around the YMCA Boys and Girls Club, and almost kind of moving this location to more of a formalized gateway entry experience and kind of a grand entrance of, you know that you are in Wisconsin Rapids. It is a clear transition into downtown, starting with the intersection. Maybe there's art there are kind of large signage, et cetera, that kind of makes it clear this is downtown Wisconsin Rapids and reestablishing that. But also the idea of having private investment and opportunities, continue to have conversations with the YMCA Boys and Girls Club on their long-term facility needs, specifically of their parking. Andrew talked a minute ago about parking and kind of reworking or kind of where all might parking go. We think there's certainly an opportunity there for having private residential development, multifamily apartments or townhomes in that location, knowing that through some opportunities we'll talk about in a moment, there might be kind of parking locations still in this general area that the YMCA could leverage, Boys and Girls Club could leverage during their large events, et cetera. But knowing that this could be a fantastic place for kind of people to live, again, starting with some of those housing locations Andrew noted, and kind of building that permanent residential population here on downtown. You can see some examples there in the bottom of the handout on the screen of kind of some of the types of housing that one could maybe envision here. Moving further east, and now up close to the river, kind of what we've been calling Centralia to the river. Starting with realigning Third Avenue to kind of straight through to Johnson, and through that extra space, it could be another opportunity for multifamily residential, for more places for people to live, now kind of on this reconfigured block. And with that then, having a public parking space kind of in the between space behind that building, and then the Tribune building there. That could be now one of these kind of designated parking spaces that could service folks trying to get to the river, trying to go for events, et cetera. I mean, as you know better than we, you're no more than 2, 3, 4 blocks from pretty much anywhere on the west side of downtown, kind of in this location, just a short walking distance. And in the Tribune building, we're certainly aware and have met with Encourage Foundation several times in their long-term plans and desires. We think, irregardless of how or when that may materialize, having a public-facing kind of service or active space and kind of an entrepreneurial space within that building is certainly would be a benefit to the community in whatever form that does take in the future. And almost one could envision then the idea of A streets and B streets. First Ave could be accommodating to that, and almost, the garage doors opening up and kind of it's spilling out into the streets. On, farmers market nights, Kyle's there flipping burgers, and we show up and kind of take a burger out to the riverfront, et cetera. And maybe the streets close down to cars and vendors can be out there. And you can see kind of a gesture through that image, what that might look like, along with some of those park acupuncture ideas that Andrew talked about a minute ago. Anything from those pop-up igloos during the winter time to maybe their seats, the coffee cart, et cetera. And really the idea being that while anchoring with new residential development, new activity at the Tribune building, preserving that building, and having that flow and be more connected to the river directly, as well as on that street potentially being redesigned so that farmers markets could happen maybe still on that street, maybe on the adjacent parking lot, which we do understand is owned by the Beadwitter Foundation today. But kind of having this be more of a hub on the west side of downtown for these types of activities and events. Looking then just adjacent to it is West Grand Ave. And I think for us, one of the things we really enjoyed is learning and understanding kind of the historic role that West Grand Ave played of really the event streets, the parades and processions that would happen. Again, we really do need to get that image in here. The great black and white of kind of this event and parade going down. West Grand Avenue, which we always think is pretty fantastic because it shows that that was a historic kind of identity of that street. And Andrew talked about streets as places, and I think recapturing that idea for West Grand Ave, preserving the existing buildings, the commercial or stores that are already there, the retail stores, et cetera, maybe making some tweaks over time to the way that that street operates through streetscape and trees in the future when a reconstruction maybe happens or kind of some opportunity driven looking at how the parking is arranged on that space. But this plan purposely understands and wants to embrace that. That was a recent project. We understand that. We're not recommending in the near term kind of an overhaul of that street in its design per se. Public Works and Engineering are taking a deep breath of relief right there. But rather, what might private development be driven towards West Grand Ave to kind of further activate it and have it be more of a destination street. You can see some of the examples there. Andrew noted too the River Block building. We certainly understand that there's a lot to figure out. That's on a long timeline, and this plan, I don't think any of us would say is dependent on a specific outcome for the River Block building, but rather should there be a future where that lease is not renewed and it does not get kind of re-upped and is a county facility, how might some uses of that space still benefit downtown, so to speak? We've also talked about, there could be some opportunities and even kind of government efficiencies by a future joint facility between the county and the city. And I know there's, again, a lot that would need to be figured out to kind of build towards that, but opportunities such as that are things that this this plan explored and really wanted to set the foundation for further exploration into the future. The last couple, and I think this triangle block one in particular, we spend a good bit of time on because I think there's some more near-term opportunities here. And Jason and others from the county were fantastic partners with us and really exploring and trying to pick apart and reassemble and how might we leverage the reconstruction of East Jackson, which we do know is coming in the next couple years or so, to both be a multimodal connector, so biking opportunities still serving cars and access into and around downtown, but then also maybe rearrange the streets into possibly a vision like what you see on your page there, where a new county shared parking facility, we understand and we know that they're looking for having more accessible parking nearer their new front entrance. And maybe that's, again, a shared facility where it can be used by the county during their operation hours, but in maybe the evenings and weekends, it's available to the general public to serve the rest of kind of the east side of downtown, which we'll talk about more in a moment. And that would allow for then an assemblage and redevelopment of, again, kind of what we've been calling the triangle block, as you can see there, for a kind of a larger residential right up against the river and kind of anchoring that side of downtown. So again, we could talk for quite some time about, the challenges and opportunities from the kind of the rearranging the streets. Really more important than what is the specific alignment of these streets is kind of this idea of there's some shared wins that I think that we feel comfortable with in terms of what's going to benefit the city and the community as well as the county and their long-term needs, and something such as what we're looking at could start to reach that. Lastly, Andrew talked about experiential retail or kind of things as kind of activity hubs, and more than just I'm going there just for a meal, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to grab a quick bite and leave, but rather it's a place where I want to hang out for a longer period of time. And we think first and second, right there with kind of more the historic triangle block could really be an anchor for that. Places where there's Jennings and Whiskey Rapids, et cetera, continue to kind of lean into the idea of might that be a restaurant kind of district or an entertainment district, leveraging the presence of the river, building on the existing restaurants and businesses that are there, adding more to them. We just a moment ago talked about having more people living just across the street from there, and also that shared parking facility to support those businesses. And then maybe transitioning those streets as well and kind of getting creative with the parking arrangements, the activities, the programming in the street that maybe there's parallel parking in there. And again, some of those parking needs then can be served by that county shared facility. And rather having these streets be more flexible where you can have maybe being shut down during events or kind of in after hours, letting kind of outdoor dining, that image on the bottom right, kind of those outdoor patio seatings. Maybe there's a parking stall or two that a business would want to kind of do a pilot on and try kind of cafe seating on the sidewalk or in a parking space and kind of trying out how might that work. Again, having this be kind of more of an entertainment and restaurant destination within kind of the heart of downtown. So those are the 5 catalytic projects, and again, I'd stress don't fall in love with the image. We've learned that, from our profession a long time ago is I can almost guarantee that almost nothing in here will get built just as shown, but rather what's the vision, what's the outcome, what's kind of the key benefits to Wisconsin Rapids that these images and this plan is seeking to shed light on. That's kind of what the plan suggests striving for, rather than saying, well, the road's got to be exactly like this, and this is the exact type of building. So I will offer that one caution. The outcomes and the goals here are really what the plan seeks to outline. And to do that then too, we conclude with an implementation plan, which I'll talk about in actually just a second, because we purposely structured this plan to have kind of a series of almost takeout sheets or kind of cutaway sheets, such as the one on the screen here, which this really summarizes everything that Andrew and I just said. So as the mayor or others are trying to kind of sell downtown, as it were, can use a sheet such as this and say, hey, we've got this great exciting vision for downtown. Here's some of the key takeaways. We'd invite you to read the plan, but if nothing else, take this with you as you're considering relocating your business, building a new apartment building, et cetera, and so forth. That implementation plan that I talked about a minute ago, we broke it kind of into two levels or two tiers, if you will. The first tier looks at more of downtown as a whole, whereas then we have, again, a series of kind of takeout, cutout sheets I'll show in a second for each of those catalytic projects. So as you'll see on this page, and again, your handout, for all of connectivity, development, and then public and open space, there's a series of actually quite detailed action steps, including what are some of the major steps, who are the lead and support agencies or departments or partners that'll be needed, and then the timeline, kind of approximate timelines with these as well. Again, one could say it's kind of Kyle Elizabeth's and the city's work plan for downtown, and really we're structured and built as such. And so really when thinking about over the coming years and decades, what are the steps that we, the city, need to realize this plan? Using these as that foundation to build those work plans was certainly the intent, as well as then the 5 catalytic projects. You can see on this page again that idea of what are the key outcomes intended from each one, summarized there in their respective locations. But for each catalytic project, as those who had a chance to look at the plan will remember, we really have almost kind of like a project page or a cutout sheet, again, that you could just literally take out from the plan and say, man, we're really ready to make the West Gateway project happen. What do we need to do, and when do we need to do it? This starts to build that foundation. It has a series of steps kind of ranked in priority of timing, some of the major steps, the components and partners, et cetera. So this intended and structured to be that guidance and kind of that roadmap, if you will, for realizing the respective developments. There's a lot in here. As Andrew noted, this is a big meal. We'll certainly acknowledge that. And so hopefully kind of through this structure of an implementation plan starts to give, hey, here's a manageable size plate, if you will, for this meal. We'll take a little bit over here, we'll take a little bit over there, and slowly over the years and decades, we're starting to take this meal down, so to speak. So we've greatly appreciated the opportunity, again, working with Kyle, Elizabeth, you all. We're thrilled at having this chance in front of you, and we're looking forward to some questions and a conversation as time allows. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone else. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, I noticed that when I was going through it again over the weekend, the inexperienced bike riders part. So is that like that stretch up to the library through there? Is that where you're talking about, where the bike lanes line up right up to the parking that we did fairly recently? I'm just wondering, is that what you were talking about in that area?
Sure, let me just get to a map that might describe that well. Yeah, let's just, here. So the area you're talking about, I believe, is East Grand Avenue, right? Those are bike lanes that are in between parked cars and moving cars. So those are perfectly fine bike lanes for experienced riders.
Okay.
So if that's the area I was referring to. The Jackson Greenway, as proposed in this plan, provides bike access to downtown for families, young riders, and experienced riders.
I see. So we wouldn't touch that, is what you're saying. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you
we're
were
not.
talking about replacing that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it
I see.
augments it. I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
I would augment it.
I got you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other question I had, and this is more about council too. One of the comments I saw about potential Uber, things of that nature. Now we have a bit, somebody said, one of the comments is we don't have public transportation. So we sort of do in the fact that we supported public transportation, but I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for the private sector? Like, do you think Uber stays away from here because we don't have that? And I mean, I'm looking at like Uber or Lyft at bar time, you know, that kind of thing. And it just seems if we are developing and putting more restaurants and such, there might be opportunities for that. I'm just wondering if we've ever, if in fact that private sector says there's not a point for it. I mean, there's Uber and Lyft in point, but right now, do you think they stay away from that for that reason? I guess that's for both Kyle and.
So my opinion is spot on, that I think, right, downtown Wisconsin Rapids doesn't function similar to a Main Street community like Marshfield or Point. We have two sides of the river, two bridges, retail, restaurants on both sides, but the retail and the restaurants we do have are very limited. We have destinations in the YMCA and the library, but aside from that, there's not that restaurant, retail, nightlife scene. And if we don't have that scene, I don't think those agencies you referenced are going to follow. I think the hope with the plan and what I think could liven an entertainment district is housing, right? Because if you have housing now, you have 24/7 residents in your downtown, that will hopefully be the catalyst to have additional retail, service-type uses, restaurant-type uses when you have that 24/7 living. We've got a fairly high daytime population, but after that, really the primary patron establishments are those of the taverns. So I think housing is the key, and over time, as the consultants have identified, there are strategic locations where we can inject some of those housing sites, and then hopefully that'll spark the additional business.
Thank you. So one thing I noticed as I'm looking through the renders and hearing the plan, and as you mentioned, it's never exact to how the renders are, but I do think of large areas in the downtown that are currently occupied by other entities such as the county or Mead-Witter Foundation, and they lease the River Block building to the county. So I was just wondering, has this plan been formally presented to the county and the other people who own a lot of property downtown?
I'll chime in first, and then the consultant can elaborate further on specifically how the conversations went. But in regards to the county, Jason Gruenberg, who's my counterpart at the county, was asked to be on the steering committee, so he would have direct involvement with the oversight, given the county's ownership of property in the downtown. Aside from the steering committee meetings, he was at the table at almost every other consultant meeting, unless it was something simple like a phone call. So yes, both him and Ruben, their facilities director, were both at the table throughout the entirety of the plan. In regards to Mead-Witter, I believe was the other reference, as they own property next to the Tribune. I know 2 meetings had occurred between the consultant and them, and I had some brief conversations with their representatives as well.
Thank you. And secondly, I'd just like to emphasize what you all spoke about, which is I think we need housing down there. 24/7 residence was a great way to put it. Over my time here, there has been housing that's went in the general area of downtown. I'd say it's the senior living, and I would say that you don't see an impact on the downtown businesses per se. I mean, a lot of them are limited, but as far as the Centralia Center, I don't know if volume's picked up or it's always been busy, but that certainly has been an easy, walk or transport over there to bring some life to that. And I think on the other end of it, normal housing, whether it be in an apartment or however it's structured, if you get younger folks in there, you'll see them patronize the businesses and bring that 24/7 life. So I don't know which comes first in this plan. I mean, you guys kind of laid it out, but in my mind, I definitely think housing.
Any other questions?
So I hate to distract from what's not in the plan because this is a lot to digest. But I keep thinking about how our river is a huge asset, and we have other communities that we can look at that have a river in their downtown area. And I see that those communities use the river. So not only can people access downtown from the greenways and the walks pass and the parking that's there, but they can also access downtown using the water and capitalizing on recreation. Is that something that was considered when we put together this plan? Is that a very long-term goal?
Sure. Yes, definitely. I mean, to some degree, there's a natural, well, it's not natural, it's a man-made constraint where the dams are, right? So the pool, as they say, is not extraordinarily large, that, you know, it's a couple miles here and there. So it's not extraordinarily large. But the plan does have recommendations for small dock behind, I don't know the name of the building, on the east side of the river, on First Avenue, for small boats. The whole idea of park acupuncture is intended to sort of open up the imagination about different ways to access the shoreline from water. So absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we just today we saw people fishing from shore, but there's no reason why it couldn't, you know, and I assume people do. Now, there's also I assume people do fish from the boat in the area. Now, there is the water there are safety issues. Water can be turbulent, right? That's in all rivers, so that's a consideration as well. But water-based recreation makes a ton of sense here, by all means. I think there's a boat launch not far from downtown, but a boat launch in downtown, again, is another, that's in that category of park acupuncture. Not a big project, just another way to get more users within the park space and the river itself.
Thank you.
I'll just note too, sorry about that, Madeline, that it wasn't, it wasn't the primary focus given the recent park improvements that had occurred, from 2017 to now, and the recent planning efforts and redesign that was put together for the park space riverfront. The thought was the reality of this plan is to plan for the next 10 to 20 years. And given the recent improvements to the riverfront, again, more minimalistic approach to the reality of investing dollars, city dollars, into those park spaces was low. And so the easiest way to do that with a low cost was through those acupuncture type of improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we need the development downtown in order for people to want to access it from every way possible. So I understand that as well. Thank you.
Would food trucks be a disruption instead of a coffee cart? Because there's a big industry. I've noticed that the food trucks are coming more and more into town from all over, from Marshfield and everybody to come to this area to sell their food, but they're selling them more on 8th Street than anywhere.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think actually they perfectly fall into this idea of kind of activating these streets up against the river. One could pretty easily envision, as it already happens with the farmers market, having even more food trucks there and kind of even maybe designating kind of a food truck hub or a space. Maybe it's off to the side of the street in a paved area where we know this is kind of a designated hub for food trucks. So no, I think they actually perfectly fit in and are exactly the kind of line of recommendations that this plan suggests.
Any other questions? Anybody from the audience that has any questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, this might be more of a question for Kyle, but how can the city prioritize these catalytic projects in the capital improvement plan? And what would be the strategy for balancing the long-term investments with immediate priorities, say like housing?
Yeah, so I think that's a loaded question. I think with regards to some of the infrastructure improvements that are, relatively low cost, there are several resources that we can pursue, whether it's grants, through local organizations or through state agencies. In regards to private investment, a new plan that's adopted like this can go a long way towards kind of proving that the city is engaged and proving that the city is willing to continue to invest in the downtown. We've got a good foothold with the recent park improvements I mentioned over the last couple of years, as well as other things that we have in the works, such as a downtown housing study that the county is funding over the next couple of months. The Foundry planning project that's on the edge of the downtown that certainly could be roped into the success of the downtown. Ultimately, though, it lies with you. We as staff, myself and Liz in the planning department, will bring forth, following the guidelines here and the implementation strategy, we'll bring forth these ideas and these improvements, try to be strategic about their funding sources, but ultimately it would lie with council as to whether or not it stacks up against all the other requests for capital or operating improvements from year to year.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kyle. I mean, given the opportunity for public and private partnerships, what role will private equity and developer funding play in financing these projects, and how can the city mitigate financial risks with it?
Again, that's somewhat of a loaded question. I think with any downtown development, cities often have to provide incentives to convince developers to invest within the downtown versus greener pastures, so to speak, on the outskirts or in subdivisions. So I think the city is going to be at the table from the start when it comes to investing private equity in the downtown. But I think, again, if we can show a developer that, right, we have a need when it comes from housing, pursuing that housing study, we've formally thought out and planned for roadways, infrastructure, access, pedestrian accommodations that could hopefully spark and lead to additional business growth. I think a developer will be more willing, when all of that's combined, to invest here than in other communities. But again, downtown development is tough because there are other factors unforeseen, some of which could be environmental contamination, such as we're dealing with the Foundry, could be like on the Triangle site with the high bedrock, right? So 3 to 4 feet deep, you're hitting bedrock. Those are all typically impediments that you don't have if you're developing on the periphery of the city. So there are different tools that, again, state agencies offer that we can pursue. TIF, we've got a downtown TIF. We're looking at doing a new TIF or an overlay TIF as the downtown TIF expires or the expenditure period ends in 2027. So we will continue to be strategic about our approach to enticing development in downtown, and this plan will go a long way to assist us as staff in doing that.
Any other questions, Ryan?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Kevin?
Kevin Penman, 710 3rd Street South. I participated in this project through the website. I have to say a lot of this stuff looks very exciting to put in. One of my biggest complaints, and the same is from my spouse, is that when you go to downtown, there isn't really that much to do. I agree with the idea that for the businesses to have the support to do what they're, to expand and to bring in additional amenities, you have to have a solid customer base. And yes, you can go into downtown sometime, I'm going to say after about 6, and everything just looks kind of quiet and dead, except for in the bars. So absolutely, housing is needed. But the other thing is, you were talking about over at the plant, there needs to be places for people, those people to work. If you're in a large metropolitan area like where I came from, you can have bedroom communities, you know, in the suburbs. I lived in one where basically the only thing that's there is housing, restaurants, and some shopping. And you know, people are willing to drive the whatever 30 minutes it was to go to where the industry centers were to work. But this is a separate town, so it has to have that as well. The other thing that we're talking about the riverfront and the use of the riverfront, and I'm all for that, and I have yet to put my boat on this river, but I have concerns about the navigation of the river. I know it's a hard surface, it's uneven. I don't know how clear it is north of Bell Island up to the bridges, and maybe someone else does. But the idea of having restaurants with entertainment venues that are right on the river that you can get to by foot traffic, by bike traffic, by car, and by boat is just phenomenally exciting. We used to have a place in Menasha, and we'd take our boat up over to Oshkosh, up the Fox River, and all along the river on each side of the river, every single square foot of the riverbank was used either for businesses like restaurants and bars or residential stuff. Everything from low-income apartments to very expensive apartments. And in fact, if you're looking for an example, I would say go look at that, because it was really exciting. And the point is that it gives everyone an example. If you're going a way to do things the way they want to do that, but your base, you know, getting things like Uber and Lyft, yes, you need people. They need regular customers to do that kind of stuff. And the regular customer base will only come when you have the people here, and the surrounding houses, my own included, isn't enough to support that. And that's why the residential development, I think, is extremely important to get off the ground, to get people here. But the question is, will they come if there's only housing? Do we also need to have places for them to work to come? You guys know this area better than I have. I've only been here 14 months. That would be the thing that I would say to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Yes.
Thank you. And this might be a silly one. Do we know how many businesses currently exist in the downtown district? And are there, I know we were talking a lot about utilizing the existing buildings, which I think is a phenomenal idea, because there are such beautiful buildings that you wouldn't be able to replicate. But is there also vacancy for new businesses looking for a place to, you know, to house their business? I'm interested in that aspect, because I think housing is important, but it almost seems like it has to be subsequent with also developing the existing downtown. So I'd love, Kyle, your feedback on that.
Yeah, early on, part of the process was data collection with regards to everything downtown, transportation to property use data. And so we did export through our assessor's office that does identify uses. We improvements, uses, housing, business. We provided that export to them. I don't recall how many businesses there were. We were primarily looking at housing to get an idea of, again, the housing within the downtown. The business one's a little bit harder. You'd almost have to do a walking survey, because you'll get a lot of LLC ownerships, and so you don't know, is that the landlord? Is what sort of businesses are within that building? We have a lot of buildings, or a couple buildings downtown, that have internal access to businesses, so the doors are internally, one shared common door. So I think we have some data too, going back the last couple of years when we were considering designation through WEDC as a Main Street community. You've got to identify your businesses and your participants there. So we do have lists. I don't think they're exhaustive and incorporate totals, but I think as we continue to pursue the strategies outlined in this plan, having that information is beneficial, because I think if we can get the businesses to buy into this plan and other improvements that we make into downtown, that can be the catalyst for them to convince their colleagues that may have businesses elsewhere in the community and are growing to grow in our downtown rather than 8th Street or other locations. Anything to add, gentlemen?
Not really. I mean, I think you covered it well. Gathering data for a number of businesses is always very difficult. There are a lot. The biggest employer downtown is public, right? It's the city and the county. We can tell you there's a lot of small businesses downtown. They probably change a lot, coming and going, coming and going. Hopefully, this plan inspires investment confidence in them to stay downtown as a good place for their customers and for their employees. Hopefully, this is a place for the businesses see it as a high quality of life, and not just to live, but to do business downtown as well. And then an emphasis on businesses that really leverage the value of the river and the amenity of the river, which really is the calling card of downtown. So.
Just a comment, and great presentation. And Kevin said something really interesting, and will they come? Will they come? I think one of the urgencies about this is how do we get them not to leave? And, and I don't think that wasn't really mentioned. We have a lot of people here that are at the age they're starting to go to school, and they go to school and they don't come back. and if we don't show some kind of aggression in terms of getting this moving, at least in some sector, as soon as possible, show that we're doing it, we do lose the chance of people leaving. I mean, there's a lot of growth in the surrounding area, especially in Stevens Point. There's a lot of, Plover's our competition, if you will, I always say. And they're pretty aggressive in some of the things they're doing. And people are staying there. And people go to school there and they're staying there. We've got people that are growing here. They go to school and then, let's just stay in Point because I like, And so I think, yeah, it's important to try to draw as much population to the area as possible, but it's also important to try to keep what we have. And so I think we need to share that we're going to do this. If we're going to do these kinds of things, we need to start at least getting it out there in the public. Yeah, this is what we have on the horizon. And this is, so I just think trying to keep everybody here is a big plus as well. Thanks.
And the only thing I would mention about that is housing is an enormous part of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Your housing stock across the city is aging. It is not super diverse in terms of its offerings. Meanwhile, household compositions have changed tremendously in the last 40 years, to the point where over half the households have one or two people in them. You don't have a housing stock to match that housing profile.
Yeah.
So housing is a real important part of keeping people here.
Absolutely.
All right. Andrew, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Thanks for all your work that you put into this, all the efforts you put into the community. You spent a lot of time talking and kind of coming up with these ideas, so we appreciate it very much. Is there anything else, Kyle?
No, other than just a formal thank you. It has been a pleasure working with you guys. You're more than welcome to stick around till 6 o'clock before we have another Common Council meeting. But otherwise, I look forward to wrapping things up, hopefully next month, with a official adoption of the plan then, which would be action by both Plan Commission as a recommendation and Common Council. And then we'll have an adoption date on the plan, right, kind of a final cover for it. And it'll be done from there.
Thank you all thank you very much.
You're
This
welcome.
really has been a pleasure of a project for us. We love doing it. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Liz. Thank you all. And we look forward to seeing it come to fruition over the upcoming years. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks again. Okay, so with that, at 5:32, I am closing the Planning Commission meeting. And then, I don't think we have to vote. I'm going to go ahead and just close the council meeting, and we'll reconvene at 6 o'clock for the actual council meeting. Thanks, everybody.